samasta sukhino bhavantu. Namaste, Nirupa.
Namaste, Austin. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you today?
Fabulous. It's a little bit out of our normal time because we normally meet in the evenings when the sun is about setting, and today we have the beauty of this gorgeous afternoon winter sun.
I know, we have a nice winter solstice. I don't know, it's not solstice, but winter afternoon sun.
Sun coming through. You know, I'm really good. Thank you for asking. And how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good.
Excellent. So I wanted to kind of launch right into the topic of the month because it's about one of my favorite players of the Indian pantheon.
Yes, yes.
Krishna.
Lord Krishna.
Lord Krishna. And it is also about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, which is Leela or play.
Yes.
And if I may just kind of contextualize for those who are listening to us, where we are right now in the Urban Sadhu yoga studio in Jersey City, the room that Austin and I are sitting in is called Leela.
It's called the Leela, yeah.
It's the Leela room. And here we are with our player of players.
Krishna, Lord Krishna.
You know, so
as the flute player, who is also named Gopal, and a lot of different names when he's a young man.
Gopala, who is full of mischief. So I don't think you knew this about me, but in India, you know, we have our own version of the zodiac. And my birth star is Mohini, which is the star of Krishna.
Ah, nice.
And so growing up, actually, I've always had this implicit affinity towards the Lord Krishna. And there's a running joke about in my house, because when I used to be young, I used to steal from my mother's kitchen.
Of course.
And I used to steal butter, and I would steal ghee.
Oh, yeah.
And later on, as I grew up, I started dating, which was completely unacceptable at that point in time in South India. And I had multiple boyfriends.
So you're a little like your star.
I was following my player of
You're
players.
energetic.
Yeah, exactly. So he dances and he lives within me. And to this day, I think back on this, and it always brings me a chuckle. You know, and so in that spirit of play and kind of playful exploration, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the art of crossing over. Right. And I know we're going to speak about the Rasa Leela, but just like we always start out any focus of the month, I'm curious, what was the inspiration for this month's discussion?
So over the past, I would say 4 or 5 years, I've had different students and other teachers ask me to say something about transgender and how the transgender community fits into the yoga teachings. And that has been a very hard subject and difficult subject for me to approach, mainly because I wanted to be sensitive to the subject and have something insightful to say that just didn't play into the politics of the moment, but actually had something deep to say. It's important to say that within the yoga tradition, there are many, many beings that change gender. That change sexuality, or become agender. They become gender neutral. And they are a mix between male and female energy. And what we also find is the more divine a being becomes, the more comfortable they are with their opposite gender, which is very unique to the, like you said, the Indian culture. It's not really part of Western mythology or gender identity. Even if you look at Lord Krishna here as the flute player, there's a kind of curviness and femininity to the posture that he's in that, you know, is even students who don't know what they're looking at will come in and say, who is she?
Yeah.
Because it's that sensuality in the form that they misinterpret it as only being feminine.
You know, it's interesting. Can I just say one thing, actually? Now that the way you're describing this to me, and for me, honestly, it's always amazing to look through your eyes of something that I've grown up with, because I am now seeing this for the first time in a different way.
Yeah.
Because growing up, there is first a tradition in India, and I don't know whether it's a North Indian thing as well, but for the South, children are cross-dressed all the time.
All right.
So you'll see little boys dressed up like little Krishnas, little girls dressed up like little Krishnas. No, seriously.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so they wear jewelry, and you wear kajal, which is like this black eyeliner. And it's also equally common, and I've seen old pictures of my family where boys are dressed in girls' clothes.
Right.
I haven't seen the other version because I frankly think growing up I didn't have access to pants. I don't remember that.
Right.
But I've seen a lot of boys being dressed in little girls' frocks and clothing and things, right? And if you also look at the statue behind us, the adornment of the henna is also a very classically female thing as well. You see more women in India that wear that. And the bindi, right? Like it's also a very classical female adornment.
When he's young,
and
to
also
when
look
he's
at the amount of jewelry.
a lot of jewelry, a lot of drapery, a lot of, and like I said, a lot of hip movement.
Yeah.
Very hippie, and
Yeah.
kind of this unstable, kind of on one foot, the other leg crossed over, balancing on a toe. It's meant to evoke the feminine energy because he's divine. He's comfortable with both male and female energy. It's not that he's one or the other. It's like and that is the yoga tradition. The yoga tradition has always been that the left side is female energy, the male side is the right side, and that they're out of balance. This is the Ida and the Pingala and the Shuddhanadi in the center. They're trying to get the energy to move up the center instead of shooting back and forth through the left and the right. So you're trying to balance out those two energetics, sometimes called sun, sometimes called moon. But
Why? And I'm curious as well as to, for me, the more known way to access this topic is through Shiva and Shakti. I'm just curious as to why you chose to do this through Krishna and Radha.
Well, I think that the story is sweeter, and it's also kind of, this is February, and it's a love story. The Risa Leela is the love story between Krishna and Radha. And so there's this coupling that's happening, and one partner is willing to go a step further because of their love for the other partner. Right, so it's, whereas the Shiva and Shakti story is the two of them merged together into one because a sage doesn't want to pay homage to Parvati. So it's a very like, that's a discussion about misogyny and like not willing to acknowledge the female divine. And so they fuse together into one form, Shiva and Shakti, so that he can't slight her.
Yeah.
So this choice is between two people who consciously make a choice for each other and consent. Yes.
And before, I want to read the story as well, but before I go into it, I know that a lot of people know who Krishna is, but I'm not entirely sure if everyone knows who Radha is. So do you want to just set the stage a little bit on who the two players are in the story?
So Radha, when Krishna is a young man, and he's in a cow herding village, right? He's a cowboy. He has a beloved, Radha, and there's a lot of different stories about Radha. The relationship between them is a little tabooed. We don't know why. She may be married. She may be like a distant cousin. She's older, we think. That's kind of what the text leads to think, that she's a little older than he is, a little more mature than he is. And so they have this secret love affair where every night they meet in the forest, and he plays the flute and she comes and dances with him, but this wakes up everybody else in the village, and they come and dance with the two of them. But as they dance, everybody becomes Radha, and like Radha, and so everybody's Radha dancing around Krishna, right? So we're all Radha. All of us are Radha, right? We're Radha longing to be with Krishna. And so there's there's an element of this secret love affair that's happening between the two of them. And of course, if you know the story, finally at some point, Krishna has to go and continue doing his dharma, and he has to leave the village, and he becomes the Krishna that we know in the Mahabharata, which is an adult Krishna, and he never really sees Radha again. There's a kind of bittersweet element,
ephemeral element to this.
To it, and he never plays the flute again. This is one thing that a lot of people don't know. His flute playing is only in the Risa Leela, is only when he and she are together. And somehow when he leaves her and never sees her again, the music stops.
Oh, that's kind of like almost like a sweet tragic story
Yeah,
of,
there's
of
a
Krishna losing his muse or his creative,
his creative, and he always loves her more than anybody else. And we know that in the adult life, Krishna marries many, many women. He has he has a complete, what we would call a harem.
Yes.
And but he weds them out of obligation. He loves them, but he's not in love with them. You can kind of see it. He doesn't. That passion that he has for Radha is never implied in the other stories with these other wives that he has. There's always something that's with Radha.
Sounds like there were star-crossed lovers that just could not consummate fully their union.
Yes, because of whatever social
norms were.
Norms are. We don't know what they are really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me read the story quickly. So this is from the Rasa Leela, right? And Rasa means essence.
Yeah.
Correct? And Leela means play. So the essence of play, really.
The essence of play.
One day, Radha was feeling oppressed and sad about her status as a woman and wife and said to Krishna, "You don't know what it is like to be me, a woman. Sometimes I wish I were a man like you. It must be liberating to have so many freedoms that we women do not possess. I want to know what it is like to be Krishna." Without a word, Krishna started to take off his clothing, and Radha said, "What are you doing?" And Krishna replied, "Radha, take off your sari. You want to experience what it is like to be me? I want to experience what it is like to be you. We will switch roles. You will become the man and I will become the woman." Radha started taking off her clothing, stripping away the identity that she felt was keeping her from experiencing what Krishna experienced. This act of cross-dressing gives the lovers insights into each other's experience, allowing them to turn things upside down and see the world from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So profound. I have a couple of questions for you on this, actually. Oh, sorry, let me finish this. The story is not done. In the end, Radha realizes that although her appearance has changed and the world around her interacted differently while she was dressed as a man, her heart still longed for Krishna. Her longing to be one with him had not changed. She realized that the soul, no matter what physical form it occupies, still wishes to be closer to God. Only through the act of cross-dressing could Radha have this spiritual realization. Now, this story is known as the Gore Gwala Ki Leela, the game of the fair cowherder, and Krishna's cross-dressing is called the Krishna's Trivesha, Krishna as girl. This is not the only story about Krishna putting on women's clothing or transforming himself into a full woman. In a Tamil Nadu folktale, which is the state that I'm from, he transforms into Mohini, meaning enchantress, so that a doomed soldier has a lover to weep and mourn over his dead body at the end of a bloody war. Oh, how beautiful. So gorgeous.
Yeah. And so it's obvious that as the being is more divine, the less it's attached to this idea of gender identity. It can move fluidly from one thing to the other without any kind of fluctuations.
Now, let's talk through the sentence where you said, but for Radha to access that kind of divine transcendence and to be one with her beloved, she had to almost use this technique of cross-dressing. It almost is like a technology that, like yoga, on the mat, through your movement on the mat, you access a kind of transcendence, correct? So talk to me a little bit about, for her, what that cross-dressing meant, and then what it meant for Krishna.
Right. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that, and I'm paraphrasing, that no matter what form the soul, whatever space the soul is occupying, no matter how dirty the body is, the soul is never tainted. Therefore, the body isn't contaminated. The soul isn't contaminated by the body. And this is the same case with Radha. Even though she switches gender, she actually becomes Krishna. The people around her see her as Krishna. She still longs for him. The soul is still the same. So the human soul is always longing to know the divine, no matter what form we're in. We can change our form, but that is deep inside of us is always learning, wanting to know higher consciousness. Mm-hmm. So that was a beautiful moment of talking about form, and while we're so hung up on form as a culture, right? We're very obsessed with form. In reality, yoga's always trying to get you to go beyond the form. The form can change. It'll change lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. It'll never be the same. So, but the soul's always going to be the same. The soul's always going to look to go deeper into the self.
It's gorgeous. I mean, like, it's also interesting for me that through the entire explanation that you gave me, you never once brought up the word gender.
Because gender will change. Lifetime after lifetime, gender is going to change.
You could show up in our next lifetime when we do this talk again. You know, we might switch roles. I might be the guy, or you might be the woman, or I might be Arthanarishwarar, which is like the in-between form, the third sex, which we also know the third sex has openly existed in India.
Yes.
We have the third sex that has been visibly an alive identity. Granted, a very persecuted identity in parts.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but to your point, what you're reminding me as well, because Austin, this is one thing, it's a fairly advanced concept. As much as you stand in front of class, and I'm taking class with you, and you're like, nobody, you're not the mind, you're not the body. Mm-hmm. My material, the Nirupa avatar, the incarnation that I am right now, as much as I've been coming to you for like 8 years, it's an advanced concept.
It's
okay?
a very advanced concept. Now, the interesting thing about bhakti, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what we're talking about this month. It's bhakti yoga. It's the yoga of devotion. Is that it embraces the idea of form a little differently and feelings and emotions differently. It incorporates those things a little bit more than some of the earlier teachings that kind of say, you're not the body, you're not the mind, you're not the thoughts, you're not the feelings. The Patanjali, very like intellectual, like, academic, this is emotional felt learning process. So Radha is feeling emotions. She's tired of this secret love affair, whatever's keeping them apart. She's a woman, and there's certain things that are keeping her back from like being with him and experiencing life fully. And she sees Krishna in his life as a young cow herder doing what he wants to do, and that's the story. Like, Krishna does whatever he wants to do in those early stories, right? He's having a good time with his buddies, and she kind of like says, I want to experience what you're experiencing. He's like, well, fine, let's experience it. I have no problem with this. And she experiences it. She is allowed, she's allowed to experience that. And her feelings lead her to higher consciousness.
Through the path of the heart.
Through the path and the body. The body changes. The body changes, the heart then can change, and then higher consciousness can change. So it's a different technique. It's Tantra. This is a Tantric teaching. The body is incorporated. The emotions are incorporated.
So I hope I'm understanding this right. In the Tantric tradition, what you're saying is the body is it's both a vehicle to access the heart space through which you access higher consciousness. Is that what it is?
Yes. Without, in the Tantric tradition, without a body, you cannot achieve higher consciousness. They accept that. There is much more, is much more embracing of the body itself. Remember, Hatha yoga, yoga asana, the way practicing it is tantric. It's a tantric tradition. It's later.
As opposed to?
As opposed to just meditation. Sitting under a tree and becoming enlightened when don't move, even when the ants bite you. You know, even sitting under the tree as the termites and the ants climb all over you, don't move. Focus on the intention of experiencing higher conscious. That's an earlier kind of harsh thing. This is a later. It's softer. It's sweeter. It's more loving.
I have a second question. So you've talked about this from the perspective of Radha. Now, the Mohini story, where Krishna is taken on the form of a woman to help access love for someone that is deprived of love, in this case, a soldier. The crossing of an emotional space for the divine being. So talk a little bit about that from his vantage point now, a little bit.
So Mohini is an interesting avatar of Vishnu. And Vishnu, who is over here on the other side of Krishna, Vishnu becomes Mohini more than once. It's the female energetic within Vishnu. And Krishna, in most traditions, is considered to be an avatar of Vishnu. So there's stories of Vishnu changing into Mohini to retrieve the Amarit, or the elixir of life, and Shiva falling in love with Mohini and them having a child together.
Who's that?
So that is Skanda.
Murugan?
Muruga.
Really?
Yeah, there's stories that is who that is. It's their child, not Parvati and Shiva. But then there are stories within the Krishna lineage where Krishna becomes Mohini. He does it in the Tamalu story where he becomes, for a soldier. He also does it in another story of an old sage who is dying, who has never experienced love. And he becomes Mohini, and it's the same kind of idea. He's there to mourn the death and be there so that the sage can say he had love.
That's beautiful.
So and he becomes a full woman in those cases. These are not like, I'm going to go behind the screen and dress up in drag and come back out. He transforms into Mohini, who is female. So it's
a full crossover.
It's a full crossover. And that's unique, right? That's very unique. And like I said, there's more than one story where he does that.
So when I listen to this, I'm just like stunned. I mean, I've always known that the origins of my culture and the traditions are it's very inclusive. It's very rich and it's very non-patriarchal.
Yeah.
And to hear you repeat this to me, where the gods of the Indian pantheon and the goddesses of the Indian pantheon, and the gods more than the goddesses, are able to adopt such gender fluidity and with such ease and with no qualms, and it's puzzling a little bit, because it's a little bit like so much of a break from reality that I know growing up.
Yeah. Well, I would even say, in most cases, people look at the goddess Durga and they don't really see masculine because she's dressed up like a bride and riding a tiger, and it's very Hollywood glamour. I mean, it's but she fights like a man. She's fierce. She holds nothing back. There's no, this surface is an illusion to actually the energetic that's underneath.
Yeah.
So I would even say that if you look deep into some of the female forms, some of them can be pretty, especially as you get into the tantric lineages, some of the lesser known can be pretty not soft and fuzzy.
No, the growing up, the fear, what I remember of the goddesses, right? Lakshmi and Saraswati for me, the goddess of wealth and the goddess of learning and the arts, they were the traditional divine feminine, okay? Like this is the very stereotypical what you associate with the feminine.
What a woman should be
like.
Quote unquote.
And then you have the really awe-inspiring, frankly, for me it was scary at that time, the Kali, the Durga, and then there's an equivalent in South India called Mariamman.
Yeah.
Okay, Amman is like, she's the equivalent of the Durga and the Kali that I think much of the world knows about. I don't know how many people know about Mariamman. And Mariamman, they say, when she gets angry, she smites you with measles.
Yeah.
So this is an angry goddess. Like I've always grown up with the idea of an angry goddess, always. Yeah. And so it actually, now that I think about it, I wonder why, why I have gone around tiptoeing, because I've had both the role modeling of the goddesses in that sense. I've had the very fluid, divine feminine of the Lakshmi and the Saraswati, and we've also grown up with Amman and Durga and Kali. I just think that this idea, and there again you're talking about crossing over and breaking down the stereotypes, the essentialism of what feminine looks like and what masculine looks like.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah?
And that's just part of the yoga tradition. It's part of the yoga tradition too. It's like you are breaking down these barriers, these blocks that these assume identities that you have about yourself, and you're questioning yourself, who am I? Am I this? Am I that? Am I what I've been told that I am? And the answer always has to come back for the yogi that what you assume to be is not what you are. What you started out thinking you were is not what and who you were.
Yeah.
And it actually really liberates us from this idea of I'm only this form, that I'm only this form. As human, I'm more than this form.
Yeah.
And I could take on many forms in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Yoga has to be about liberation. If yoga's not about liberation, it's not yoga.
Yeah. I love that. The last question for you, which is like from when you started practicing yoga, in the journey that we just described and what you've talked about today, what's the movement that you've witnessed within yourself, especially considering that you actually come from a very richly performative tradition of theater and acting?
Right.
Where you've had your own forms of stylized cross-dressing and drag, whatever you want to call it, right? Gender fluidity.
Yeah, because there's always gender fluidity in the element of theater, because you just play different parts.
So from there to like when you started practicing yoga in earnest, like what has been your own crossing over, if there has been any for you?
I think for me it's really kind of, as a gay man, it's not having to feel that I have something to prove, right? Like I think that yoga's created something in me that I don't feel like I have something to prove anymore. Whereas before yoga, I felt like I was lesser than because of my sexuality, that I had something to prove to the world. And that if I didn't achieve certain things or certain goals, I wasn't living up to potential, right? Yeah. Because the cards were stacked against you, so to speak, as a gay man. And so yoga allowed that to kind of like go, well, what was that about? Like, who decided that? Who wrote that rule? Like, was that something that I created, or is that something that really existed, and kind of let go of that. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's a real kind of crossing over into you're accessing your own freedom and accessing your own wholeness, if you will.
Yeah. And I think also, like, and right now, even, I mean, not to really bring up politics, but to bring up politics, this discussion that's going down in Florida right now, this "don't say gay" is really a terrible thing that's happening, and it's all targeted to keep elementary school children from asking about gender and gender identity. That teachers cannot talk about gender or sexual identity if a child asks, and this is a fear-based approach to our identity as human beings, right? It's fear. It's just totally driven by fear, and in the teachings of yoga, there shouldn't be that fear about identity, gender identity, or sexual identity, or questioning who am I in this body? Like, is this who I am, right? Because that is the yoga tradition.
But it's equally also, just to be clear, when you say that who am I, it's equally also to mean that all are welcome in this room as they are, right? First.
Yes. Yes.
You come as you are.
There is inclusion.
There's inclusion, and then the idea then is that you're welcome in whatever forms. You're welcome in whatever metaphysical form that you choose to show up with here.
Right.
And then the idea is that you do transcend into a certain etheric form.
Yes, you will grow out of that too.
Right. So it's not an invalidation.
Yeah.
Right. So it's an acceptance. It's an overarching umbrella that welcomes all of us as we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that's one of those things that we have to continue to remember, that as people question identity, the one sanctuary they should have is yoga, is the yoga tradition.
Yeah.
That the yoga tradition should embrace that person who's questioning, who wants to experience the other, because the stories from the yoga tradition say that it's okay to question and want to experience the other to know what it's like.
Yeah. I love that. This is a beautiful tone setting for Valentine's Day. Even though I don't celebrate Valentine's Day, but...
Well, that's the other thing. I think that the other side of the story is that, Krishna is being very generous with the person he's loved. It's a great Valentine's. It's like, I'll do whatever you need to be happy. So I will change my gender.
Yeah.
So that you can
experience transcendence.
Yes.
Beautiful.
That's really beautiful.
This was a lovely talk. Should we chant in closing
Yes.
for Valentine's Day and Krishna?
And Krishna.
And Radha.
And Radha. So we'll chant Loka Samasta Sukhino one more time. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu.
Namaste.
Namaste, Nirupa. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
It was a lovely talk.
It was too. Thank you.